The North Atlantic rolled under a low gray sky, and HMS Hesperus advanced through the icy swell with deliberate purpose, maintaining steady speed while her crew scanned the bleak horizon for any sign of the submerged predator that had eluded them across several tense hours. Cold winds swept across the destroyer's bridge, and Commander Donald Macintyre tightened his grip on the railing, studying the wavering sonar trace that suggested a German U-boat was attempting to slip away beneath shifting layers of deep water while the sea concealed its movements. Every man aboard sensed rising tension, and the muted hum of machinery created an uneasy rhythm, echoing through narrow steel corridors as operators announced repeated bearings that hinted their quarry remained only minutes farther ahead despite evasive maneuvers executed by the submerged commander. The ocean's harsh scent mixed with diesel vapors, and Hesperus's crew braced themselves against sudden gusts, knowing the slightest misjudgment could allow the enemy vessel to escape into the vast Atlantic expanse where darkness and distance often swallowed entire ships without leaving meaningful clues. A faint echo pulsed across the sonar display, and the operator called out the update, prompting Macintyre to lean forward with scrutiny as he assessed range and bearing while determining whether conditions allowed for the new weapon installed on his bow to strike effectively. The destroyer maintained disciplined silence, and waves slapped aggressively against her hull, creating a rough cadence that masked the subtle movements of the U-boat as Macintyre calculated the moment when standard procedures would give way to the technology designed specifically to counter Germany's undersea tactics. Hesperus pushed through the churning water, and the crew listened carefully as sonar returns strengthened, revealing that U-672 remained directly ahead, forcing Macintyre to decide how long to hold course before committing to a weapon requiring precise alignment for devastating accuracy. The ship's engines rumbled beneath the deck plates, and Macintyre issued quiet instructions, ensuring every crewman understood the importance of maintaining the vessel's exact position because the delicate firing sequence demanded stable direction, steady speed, and absolute confidence in the sonar reports arriving every second. A thin mist drifted across the surface, and the Hesperus's forward guns remained silent, their crews waiting beside cold metal while knowing today's attack depended not on explosive barrages but on a calculated strike delivered by an unfamiliar arrangement of mortar placed along the bow. Macintyre studied the closing range, and his expression remained controlled despite the weight of responsibility pressing against him, reminding him that hesitation could cost lives as U-672 still carried torpedoes capable of crippling the destroyer before she completed her attack run. The sonar trace sharpened abruptly, and the operator confirmed the target's distance, causing a charged stillness to sweep across the bridge as Macintyre prepared for the first decisive step in an engagement defined by timing, rather than brute firepower or aggressive maneuvering. A long wave crested beneath Hesperus's bow, and Macintyre inhaled sharply, realizing the crucial moment had arrived, prompting him to lean toward the communication tube and give the order that would unleash the weapon engineered to change the fate of submarine warfare forever. Macintyre's career began in an era dominated by strict naval hierarchy, and his early years at sea taught him that discipline, precision, and emotional restraint formed the backbone of successful command, especially when confronting unseen enemies across vast oceans ruled by unpredictable storms. He learned navigation under seasoned officers who valued calm judgment, and these formative lessons instilled habits that would later guide him through nights when U-boats stalked convoys, exploiting darkness while Allied escorts relied on intuition, endurance, and evolving technology to protect vulnerable merchant ships. Experience hardened him during the bleak early months of the war, and he witnessed convoys shattered by coordinated wolf-pack attacks, shaping his determination to master every tool capable of countering Germany's submarine fleet, which threatened to sever Britain's lifeline across the Atlantic. Macintyre developed an instinct for interpreting faint sonar echoes, and years at sea sharpened his ability to distinguish patterns that separated decoys from genuine threats, enabling quick decisions when hesitation invited torpedoes capable of destroying ships within minutes. He cultivated trust among his crew, and his measured leadership encouraged confidence during desperate encounters when escorts chased elusive contacts, relying on discipline learned from countless drills executed during freezing nights that tested endurance and willpower. Macintyre's reputation grew through repeated engagements, and his ability to remain composed under mounting pressure demonstrated a rare steadiness admired by peers, who recognized that relentless U-boat warfare rewarded patience but punished complacency without hesitation. He understood the psychology of his opponents, and he studied German tactics carefully, noting how young commanders attempted bold approaches that exploited gaps in Allied defenses, forcing escorts like Hesperus to refine their countermeasures constantly. Macintyre adapted quickly to new technology, and he viewed innovation not as an experimental curiosity, but as an essential step toward shifting the balance of undersea warfare, especially after early failures revealed the limitations of conventional depth charges. He learned to interpret environmental factors, and he recognized that temperature layers, sea states, and acoustic disturbances altered sonar readings, meaning every engagement demanded mental recalculations performed under immense pressure with minimal margin for error. Macintyre developed a hunter's focus, and his relentless pursuit of U-boats reflected a personal commitment shaped by years of watching merchant ships sink, carrying sailors who rarely received warning before explosions ripped through steel hulls. He valued discipline above aggression, and his approach emphasized precise coordination among bridge officers, sonar operators, and gun crews, knowing each role formed a vital link in the chain required to outmaneuver submarines skilled at disappearing beneath turbulent seas. Macintyre entered April 1944 as a seasoned commander hardened by countless confrontations, and his instincts, discipline, and unwavering resolve transformed him into one of the Royal Navy's most effective U-boat hunters as the Atlantic War reached its decisive phase. Germany entered the Atlantic War with a clear doctrine, and its naval leaders believed concentrated submarine operations could strangle Britain's supply routes, forcing surrender through starvation, rather than large fleet battles that favored Allied industrial strength. Early U-boat commanders operated with confidence, and their training emphasized independence, stealth, and aggressive decision-making, giving them freedom to exploit darkness, weather, and weak convoy protection during the first years when Allied escorts struggled to coordinate defenses across immense ocean distances. The German Navy relied heavily on the Type 7 submarine, and its compact design allowed long patrols, silent running, and rapid diving, enabling crews to attack convoys unexpectedly before disappearing beneath layers of shifting Atlantic thermoclines that distorted sonar readings and complicated pursuit. German doctrine stressed coordinated wolfpack tactics, and groups of submarines waited along shipping lanes, communicating through encrypted channels to converge on convoys, overwhelming isolated escorts that lacked sufficient numbers to maintain continuous screening under relentless pressure. During the war's early phase, U-boats achieved devastating results, and merchant losses soared because Allied defenses remained fragmented, leaving supply ships vulnerable to night surface attacks executed with precision by commanders trained to exploit moments of confusion. The U-boat threat increased as German bases expanded along the French coast, and these new positions extended patrol ranges, allowing submarines to strike deep into the Atlantic while reducing transit time, thereby increasing operational tempo and compounding pressure on Allied shipping. Submarine crews operated under harsh conditions, and cramped compartments, stale air, and constant mechanical noise created a punishing environment that demanded discipline, endurance, and psychological resilience rarely acknowledged by those far removed from undersea combat. Germany believed its submarines could dominate the Atlantic long enough to break Allied resistance, and early successes reinforced that conviction, encouraging further investment in new torpedoes, improved communications, and training programs designed to produce increasingly aggressive young commanders. Allied ships feared the unseen approach of torpedoes, and many escorts struggled to react effectively because depth charges required guesswork, forcing commanders to attack blindly while hoping explosions reached submarines maneuvering silently beneath unpredictable ocean layers. U-boats exploited these shortcomings skillfully, and German doctrine emphasized rapid repositioning after attacks, ensuring escorts often detected only fading echoes while the submarine adjusted depth, direction, and speed to evade retaliation from frustrated Allied ships. As the war progressed, Germany continued relying on experienced commanders, but rising attrition gradually erased its veteran corps, leaving younger officers with limited patrol experience to face increasingly sophisticated Allied defenses that matured through painful trial and error. By 1944, the once dominant U-boat fleet suffered mounting losses, yet the threat remained significant, forcing commanders like Macintyre to refine tactics continuously while integrating new weapons designed specifically to counter the doctrine that had once ruled the Atlantic. Early in the war, Allied escorts relied almost entirely on depth charges. And these weapons demanded guesswork because commanders lacked accurate means to determine a submarine's precise depth, forcing them to release explosives based on incomplete sonar readings that frequently misled even experienced operators. Depth charges detonated at preset depths, and this limitation created severe tactical constraints, since U-boats constantly shifted levels beneath the thermocline, making most attacks depend on rough estimations rather than reliable data, leading to countless wasted patterns dropped into empty water. Escorts were required to pass directly over the sonar contact before releasing charges, and this maneuver caused sonar contact to break, leaving commanders blind during the crucial seconds when the submarine executed evasive turns, depth changes, or silent runs to slip away unnoticed. The explosions generated massive turbulence, and this disturbed the water so significantly that sonar operators struggled for several minutes to reacquire the target, giving U-boats enough time to escape by exploiting the chaotic conditions created by the failed attack itself. Depth charge patterns consumed vast quantities of ammunition, and escorts frequently exhausted their reserves during prolonged hunts, leaving convoys vulnerable when additional submarines converged, knowing the destroyers had lost much of their striking capability. The blasts inflicted dangerous shockwaves on attacking ships, and inexperienced crews sometimes released charges too close, risking hull damage, equipment failures, and crew injuries, demonstrating that traditional weaponry carried inherent hazards even when striking nothing beneath the surface. U-boats adapted quickly, and commanders learned to maneuver beneath the explosion columns, allowing them to survive close attacks because shock waves weakened rapidly with depth, revealing the weapon's fundamental inefficiency when confronting agile submarines capable of rapid vertical movement. The reliance on explosive force reflected an outdated mindset, and Allied strategists gradually realized that sheer power could not compensate for inadequate accuracy, especially when submarines exploited environmental advantages unavailable to surface vessels dependent on visual navigation. Depth charges often created false optimism, and inexperienced crews mistook underwater detonations for confirmed kills, issuing premature reports that encouraged strategic complacency while submarine patrols continued sinking merchant ships across the Atlantic with persistent effectiveness. Some U-boats even used depth charge barrages to mask their escape, and the smoke, debris, and noise from Allied destroyers helped conceal their retreat, proving the weapon served unintentionally as a temporary shield for the hunted. Senior commanders recognized mounting losses, and the statistical reality showed depth charge attacks achieved minimal confirmed kills despite thousands of drops, forcing scientists, engineers, and tacticians to search urgently for a new approach that emphasized precision rather than brute explosive output. The limitations of depth charges set the stage for innovation, and the rising urgency of the Battle of the Atlantic convinced Allied leaders to embrace forward-firing projectiles, leading directly to the development of Hedgehog, a weapon designed to correct every flaw exposed by earlier failures. Engineers developing Hedgehog began with a simple premise, and they recognized that accuracy mattered more than explosive power when hunting submarines, especially because depth charges wasted energy by detonating blindly in water volumes where no target existed at the moment of impact. The concept shifted naval thinking, and designers proposed a forward-firing weapon allowing escorts to maintain sonar contact during attacks, eliminating the dangerous moment when ships passed over a target and lost all acoustic information while U-boats executed evasive maneuvers. Hedgehog used multiple small projectiles, and each carried a contact fuse that detonated only upon striking a submarine's hull, ensuring the absence of an explosion indicated a complete miss while the presence of a blast confirmed immediate destruction with unmistakable finality. The launcher held 24 spigot mortar, and these angled tubes fired their payloads in a precise elliptical pattern, creating a dense footprint ahead of the ship that forced submarines into an unavoidable zone, leaving evasive maneuvers significantly less effective. Projectiles entered the water silently, and this quiet descent prevented U-boats from detecting an incoming attack, contrasting sharply with the loud detonations of depth charges that alerted crews early enough to attempt escape or emergency maneuvers. Design teams emphasized speed, and Hedgehog rounds fell rapidly through the water column, reaching typical submarine depths within 90 seconds, reducing the window for U-boat commanders to alter their course while struggling to interpret sonar countermeasures or depth changes. The system required precise alignment, and escorts needed disciplined coordination between bridge officers and sonar operators, meaning successful deployment relied on rigorous training that integrated mathematical plotting with real-time interpretation of underwater movement. Allied commanders quickly recognized the weapon's advantages, and its introduction marked a turning point in anti-submarine warfare because escorts finally possessed a method that rewarded accuracy, minimized guesswork, and allowed multiple rapid attacks without disorienting turbulence. The weapon's contact-only detonation principle conserved explosive energy, and every successful hit delivered focused destruction directly against the submarine's pressure hull, guaranteeing catastrophic structural failure rather than relying on shockwaves that weakened unpredictably across differing depths. Hedgehog's psychological impact was significant, and U-boat crews realized silent attacks deprived them of warning signals, forcing commanders to navigate constantly under fear of unseen projectiles descending swiftly through cold, dark water toward their fragile steel hulls. The Royal Navy distributed Hedgehog widely, and destroyer escorts, sloops, and frigates adopted the system enthusiastically, finding its efficiency particularly valuable during convoy operations that required rapid transitions between detection, tracking, and targeted engagement. Hedgehog transformed the Battle of the Atlantic, and its superior accuracy, rapid sinking time, and ability to maintain sonar contact provided Allied forces with a decisive technological edge that reshaped naval doctrine and weakened Germany's once dominant submarine campaign. Hesperus surged forward through rough Atlantic swells, and Macintyre studied the strengthening sonar trace with unwavering concentration, knowing the narrow window for engagement demanded flawless timing as the destroyer closed distance on a U-boat, attempting to vanish beneath the shifting layers of cold water. Crewmen braced themselves along the forward deck, and the Hedgehog mortar waited in rigid silence, their compact projectiles aligned in an elliptical pattern that would soon arc outward, descend rapidly, and determine whether 50 men lived or died within the next fleeting moments. The sonar operator relayed updated bearings, and each pulse sharpened the picture of U-672's movements, revealing subtle adjustments in depth that forced Macintyre to decide exactly when Hesperus's speed, course, and angle aligned perfectly with the narrow corridor required for a successful attack. Wind roared across the bridge, and the destroyer pitched through foaming water while officers exchanged calm, clipped confirmations, ensuring every calculation remained accurate because a single misjudgment would allow the submarine to slip beneath the pattern before the weapon struck. Macintyre waited for the final range estimate, and tension thickened aboard the ship, spreading across every station while the crew understood they were seconds from deploying a weapon, transforming anti-submarine combat into a precise contest of timing and disciplined coordination. The U-boat maintained its evasive run, and sonar operators tracked subtle changes in heading, forcing Macintyre to adjust speed marginally, ensuring Hesperus remained directly aligned with the projected target point where Hedgehog rounds would intersect the submarine's calculated path. Sea spray lashed across the bridge windows, and the ship's engines vibrated steadily beneath the deck, creating a rhythmic backdrop as officers maintained silence. Knowing concentration mattered more than shouted orders during a moment demanding absolute mental clarity. Macintyre inhaled sharply as the sonar echo strengthened, and he recognized the approaching moment when hesitation became impossible. Understanding every second lost increased the probability that U-672 would evade the meticulously planned attack pattern. He leaned toward the voice pipe and delivered the command, and the order traveled instantly through the ship, triggering a sequence of actions practiced countless times during drills, but never carrying weight equal to this real confrontation under wartime pressure. The mortar array erupted with sharp mechanical force, and 24 projectiles arced outward in coordinated formation, disappearing into the gray sea with barely a splash, beginning their deadly descent through the darkening water layers toward the unseen steel hull below. Hesperus maintained stable course, and Macintyre listened to the quiet that followed, knowing silence meant everything depended on 90 seconds of gravity, hydrodynamics, and mathematics while the projectiles dropped toward their predetermined depth. Time stretched painfully as the crew waited, and the destroyer cut through the waves with deliberate steadiness while every man aboard understood the next sound they heard would confirm either complete failure or the absolute destruction of the submarine hiding beneath them. The projectiles descended silently through the cold Atlantic layers, and inside U-672 the crew felt only faint vibrations as the submarine adjusted trim, unaware that a precise pattern of explosives was already falling toward them with calculated speed and deadly intention. The U-boat's commander attempted evasive action, and he ordered a depth change while monitoring sonar pings that echoed through the hull, yet he could not know the Hedgehog pattern required only a single direct strike to trigger catastrophic destruction. Men moved quickly through the cramped control room, and stale air mixed with oil fumes as the crew responded to commands, adjusting ballast tanks while hoping to outmaneuver an opponent they could neither see nor effectively measure. The submarine creaked under shifting pressure, and tension deepened as the crew listened for telltale signs of approaching danger. Though the Hedgehog's near-silent entry into the water provided no warning comparable to the unmistakable thunder of approaching depth charges. Seconds passed with agonizing slowness, and the commander attempted a hard turn, hoping lateral movement might shift the submarine outside the projected impact zone. Yet the rapid descent of the projectiles left little time for meaningful escape. Metal rails vibrated faintly, and the control room lights flickered as U-672 descended another few meters. But the maneuver remained too late because the Hedgehog pattern encompassed a broad elliptical area designed exactly for such evasive actions. Suddenly a sharp, violent detonation erupted against the hull, and the projectile's contact fuse transferred its full explosive force directly into the submarine's pressure shell, sending shockwaves through machinery, wiring, and bulkheads with devastating clarity. The impact ruptured key compartments instantly, and seawater surged through torn metal while electrical systems shorted out, plunging sections of the vessel into darkness as the crew struggled to comprehend the speed of the unfolding catastrophe. Damage spread rapidly, and the submarine's structural integrity collapsed faster than damage control teams could respond, leaving men disoriented, injured, and overwhelmed by the freezing water flooding uncontrollably into increasingly compromised spaces. The boat tilted sharply, and machinery tore from its mountings as the hull buckled inward, trapping several crewmen beneath twisted steel while others attempted to reach escape hatches, now rendered impossible to operate under crushing external pressure. A second internal failure reverberated through the vessel, and compartments imploded catastrophically as water pressure overwhelmed weakened bulkheads, sealing the fate of U-672 within moments of the initial strike that shattered its survivability. The submarine descended helplessly into the dark, and the final sounds of collapsing metal echoed briefly through the deep before fading completely, marking the end of U-672 as Hedgehog's precision fulfilled its lethal purpose beneath the unrelenting North Atlantic. Hesperus held course after the explosion, and the crew listened as the deep rumble faded beneath the waves, knowing the unmistakable sound signified a direct hit that ended the U-boat instantly, leaving little chance for survivors within the crushed compartments. Sonar operators scanned the water below, and new returns showed only scattered debris drifting upward, confirming the submarine had broken apart under pressure, a fate common for vessels struck by contact-fused weapons that delivered force directly into their fragile pressure hulls. Fragments surfaced slowly, and oily patches spread across the waves, marking the position where U-672 had been destroyed, while crewmen stared silently at the spreading slick, understanding they were witnessing the grim aftermath of warfare fought in unseen depths. The destroyer reduced speed, and lookouts peered across the choppy waters, searching for any signs of survivors, despite knowing the odds were minimal, because rapid implosion usually left no time for escape attempts or controlled surfacing procedures. A few fragments bumped against Hesperus's hull, and sailors retrieved pieces twisted by extreme forces, noting how compact Hedgehog projectiles concentrated energy so precisely that even hardened steel buckled as though folded by unseen hands. Macintyre studied the debris carefully, and he recognized the scale of devastation confirmed Hedgehog's effectiveness, illustrating how its design delivered surgical destruction rather than broad shockwaves that frequently failed to penetrate deeply enough to cripple a determined submarine. Cold winds swept across the deck, and the crew contemplated the sobering reality that each destroyed U-boat meant dozens of men lost instantly, highlighting the brutal arithmetic of the Battle of the Atlantic, where survival rates for submarine crews remained tragically low. German submariners faced overwhelming odds, and statistics revealed nearly 3/4 of all U-boat personnel never returned home, making their service one of the deadliest assignments in any branch of the Second World War despite early periods of tactical success. The mathematics of undersea warfare remained unforgiving, and even experienced commanders struggled to survive repeated patrols. Because technological advances such as radar, sonar improvements, and forward-firing weapons shifted the battle decisively in favor of Allied escorts. Hesperus's crew recorded the time and coordinates, and the ship resumed patrol formation. Acknowledging their duty required continued vigilance, since additional submarines often shadowed convoys, waiting for opportunities created when escorts focused on initial engagements. The silence that followed the encounter weighed heavily on the men, and the absence of survivors underscored how Hedgehog eliminated uncertainty by providing clear confirmation of destruction, leaving no ambiguity about whether the submarine remained a threat below. As Hesperus pushed through gray seas once again, Macintyre reflected on the harsh necessity of such weapons, recognizing that victory in the Atlantic depended on tools capable of matching the ruthless physics governing underwater combat and the unforgiving environment that swallowed entire crews without trace. The early years of the Atlantic struggle exposed critical shortcomings, and Allied escorts often lacked coordination, range, and effective detection tools, allowing German wolf packs to exploit vast gaps across ocean corridors where convoys depended on limited protection that frequently arrived too late to prevent catastrophic nighttime attacks. U-boats capitalized on these weaknesses, and commanders maneuvered boldly on the surface, using darkness and superior positioning to cripple merchant shipping, while Allied air cover remained insufficient across mid-ocean sectors where aircraft endurance constraints left convoys dangerously exposed for extended periods. By 1941, many convoys suffered repeated losses, and escorts struggled to counter rapidly evolving German tactics, particularly coordinated multi-submarine assaults that overwhelmed defensive screens, forcing Allied planners to reconsider their strategic assumptions regarding submarine warfare doctrine developed during earlier conflicts. Technological limitations also hindered early escort effectiveness, since ASDIC provided useful detection only directly ahead of ships, rendering it less capable during chaotic nighttime attacks when U-boats struck from multiple directions before diving beyond the narrow detection cone. German confidence grew significantly during this period, and Admiral Donitz expanded submarine production, believing sustained pressure would eventually strangle Britain's supply lines, forcing political concessions that might alter the wider strategic course of the global war. However, Allied research accelerated rapidly, and incremental improvements in radar, radio interception, and encryption analysis began undermining German coordination, enabling convoys to reroute preemptively and escorts to close distance rapidly whenever decrypted signals indicated concentrated submarine presence. Long-range aircraft dramatically shifted the balance, and the introduction of very long-range liberators closed the deadly mid-Atlantic air gap, forcing U-boats to submerge more frequently, which reduced mobility, slowed repositioning attempts, and diminished their capability to pursue distant convoys effectively. Escort carriers further tightened the noose, providing continuous aerial reconnaissance and rapid response strike capability, allowing convoys to detect, chase, and suppress submarines long before they reached attack positions, thereby reducing the strategic effectiveness of wolfpack formations. By early 1943, the cumulative pressure became overwhelming, and U-boat losses increased sharply, reflecting a deteriorating tactical environment where Allied coordination, intelligence, and weaponry achieved unprecedented levels of efficiency across both surface and aerial components. May 1943 marked a decisive turning point, later known as Black May, when German losses reached unsustainable levels, compelling Donitz to withdraw most operational submarines, acknowledging the Atlantic battlefield had shifted irreversibly against the once dominant U-boat arm. The collapse of the offensive revealed how attrition, technological advancement, and intelligence superiority combined to dismantle Germany's undersea campaign, transforming the Atlantic into a theater where Allied supremacy now dictated strategic momentum and logistical security. Although U-boats continued operating in reduced numbers, their capacity to influence the war's direction had ended, demonstrating how relentless pressure, evolving doctrine, and coordinated multinational effort ultimately overcame a threat that once seemed poised to sever the lifeline sustaining Britain's survival. Hedgehog's legacy extended far beyond a single engagement, and its introduction marked a turning point in naval warfare, demonstrating that precision, timing, and engineering could overcome sheer brute force, transforming the Royal Navy's ability to challenge Germany's once dominant U-boat fleet across the vast North Atlantic. The weapon's design emphasized accuracy over volume, and each forward-firing projectile delivered energy directly to the submarine's hull, ensuring that successful attacks produced immediate destruction while eliminating the uncertainty that plagued depth charges, thereby redefining what constituted effective anti-submarine tactics in modern maritime conflict. Industrial capacity enabled widespread deployment, and Allied shipyards rapidly produced Hedgehog launchers and ammunition, equipping destroyers, sloops, and frigates to maintain constant pressure on U-boats while ensuring that technological advantage could be multiplied across hundreds of vessels engaged in convoy protection. Hedgehog influenced training programs, and naval officers incorporated its use into tactical doctrine, emphasizing coordinated attacks, precise sonar tracking, and disciplined execution, which fostered a culture where efficiency and accuracy became as valued as courage in determining the outcome of anti-submarine operations. The weapon's psychological impact on German crews was profound, and submariners faced the terror of near-silent projectiles descending without warning, a constant threat that forced commanders to operate defensively, limiting aggression and constraining the operational freedom that had previously defined U-boat campaigns. Hedgehog's success rate exceeded expectations, and it sank 47 U-boats with remarkable efficiency, providing tangible proof that technological innovation could decisively alter strategic outcomes in a theater previously dominated by stealth, patience, and attritional naval engagements. The combination of innovation and industrial power underscored Allied supremacy, and the ability to produce, deploy, and train crews in using Hedgehog reflected a broader capacity to synchronize engineering, logistics, and combat strategy effectively against a determined enemy. Hedgehog also accelerated doctrinal evolution, and lessons learned during its deployment influenced post-war anti-submarine tactics, sonar design, and forward-thinking strategies that prioritized precision strikes, highlighting the enduring influence of a weapon that merged technology with disciplined human decision-making. Naval historians credited Hedgehog with shortening the Battle of the Atlantic, and its cumulative effect reduced shipping losses, preserved vital supply lines, and contributed to the eventual collapse of Germany's undersea offensive, emphasizing the decisive impact of weapons that combined science, strategy, and execution. The weapon's legacy persisted in post-war navies, and similar principles guided development of homing torpedoes, depth charge improvements, and other forward-firing anti-submarine systems, demonstrating that Hedgehog's innovation reshaped both immediate wartime outcomes and long-term maritime doctrine. Hedgehog symbolized the fusion of tactical ingenuity and industrial capacity, and its deployment highlighted how relatively simple engineering solutions, when applied with discipline and foresight, could overcome technological parity or numerical advantage held by a previously dominant adversary. Ultimately, Hedgehog preserved lives while enforcing the unforgiving mathematics of submarine warfare, and its influence ensured that commanders like Macintyre could operate with decisive advantage, transforming a perilous, attritional struggle into a controlled, lethal contest that ended Germany's undersea empire permanently beneath the Atlantic waves.